June 53 BC, just after dawn, on the open plain near Carrhae, in northern Mesopotamia, the light came hard and white over the flats, already burning the mist off the ground. Roman infantry were moving before the full heat rose, shields knocking against mailed shoulders, sandals dragging through powder-dry dust. Sweat had started early. It ran under helmets, into eyes, down the neck, soaking the wool tunics beneath the armor. Ahead of them, there was almost nothing. No village smoke, no tree line, no river glittering nearby. Just land opening wider and wider, as if the earth itself were pulling away from them. Marcus Licinius Crassus made the decision that morning to keep pushing inland instead of holding to the safer line of the Euphrates. He trusted the guidance in front of him and the urgency behind him. The army obeyed at once, because Roman armies always did. Columns adjusted, standards tilted forward, orders moved down the ranks in clipped Latin: keep pace. Close up, advance. The consequence came almost immediately. The farther they marched, the more the plain stripped them bare. The river was gone behind them. The air turned still. Men began glancing sideways, not at an enemy, but at emptiness. One legionary tightened the leather wraparound, his sword hand because his palm would not stop sweating. Another kept licking split lips that would not stay wet. The cavalry horses tossed their heads and showed the white around their eyes. Even before the Parthians appeared, the Romans had begun to feel the shape of the trap. Then the sound arrived. Not a charge, not a battle cry. A deep rolling thunder, rhythmic and deliberate. Drums, somewhere ahead in the haze. It moved through the plain like distant storm beats. The marching line hesitated. Officers barked for order. Crassus responded by compressing his army into a tighter formation. A great defensive mass meant to resist attack from every side. It was a practical Roman choice, disciplined and familiar, and it handed the initiative away. Out of the shimmering distance came Surena's cavalry. Horse archers spreading wide, armored riders behind them, sunlight flashing off metal hidden moments earlier under cloth and skins. They did not rush in to meet shield and sword. They kept moving. They kept their distance. Then the first arrows came down. Not a volley to open the battle, a punishment to begin it. Men fell without touching an enemy. A centurion pitched backward with a shaft through his face. A standard-bearer stayed on his feet for 3 breaths too long, staring at the arrow in his arm before his knees gave way. From inside that tightening Roman square, you would have understood the horror at once. There was courage here, plenty of it, but nowhere to spend it. Crassus made his next decision fast. He ordered Publius, his son, forward with cavalry and picked men to drive the Parthians off. The riders broke from the Roman mass and surged into the dust, and Surena let them come. Publius Crassus rode out hard, taking the Roman cavalry, Gallic horsemen, and a body of light infantry with him, all of them sent to do one thing: stop the bleeding. His father had made the choice under pressure: stay inside the square, and the arrows would go on falling. Strike out, and there was still a chance to break the ring before panic could spread. So Publius lowered his spear and drove toward the Parthian riders vanishing through the dust. At first it looked like the decision might work. The horse archers ahead of him gave ground fast, bending away across the plain as if they were finally cracking. Roman voices rose behind him. The pace quickened. Hooves hammered the earth. Dust climbed around the riders in choking sheets. One young infantryman, running to keep up with the mounted advance, nearly lost his sandal in the powder and kept going barefoot, clutching his shield strap so hard his knuckles turned pale beneath the dirt. The enemy were moving away. That was enough to feed hope. But Surena's men were not fleeing. They were measuring. The farther Publius pushed from the main Roman force, the looser the world around him became. The sounds of the legions behind faded. The line of retreat blurred. Then the Parthians wheeled, not all at once, not dramatically, but with the cold precision of men who had rehearsed this moment. Horses twisted sideways. Bows came up. Arrows flashed backward even as the riders moved off. Others peeled in from the wings. And behind them, where the heat haze had hidden the depth of the trap, the armored cavalry began to appear. Publius chose to commit fully. There was no clean withdrawal now. He ordered the attack in earnest, throwing his men forward before the circle could close. The consequence was savage. The Gauls crashed into the nearest riders and found iron instead of panic. Parthian cataphracts met them breast to breast, armored horse against armored man, long lances punching through shields, through mail, through flesh. Around them the horse archers kept moving, loosing again and again, never still long enough to be pinned. Roman light troops tried to answer, but the range was wrong. The angle wrong, the battle itself wrong. This was not the kind of fight they had been trained to win. Publius was hit. So were the men around him. Horses screamed and toppled. A wounded standard carrier tried to raise the pole from one knee, failed, and used it instead to brace himself as another shower came down. If you had stood there in that dust, you would have felt the terror in the rhythm of it. Not one great collision, but an endless stripping away. Soon the detachment had nowhere left to break toward except a low rise in the open ground, and the Parthians were already closing around it. On that low rise, Publius made his last real decision. He stopped trying to outrun the trap and ordered his men to hold. The survivors pulled in tight around him, shields up, horses stumbling among the wounded. The whole knot of Romans shrinking under a sky that seemed too bright to look at. Arrows kept coming, not in one great storm now, but in waves. Each one measured, patient, ruinously controlled. Men who had marched east expecting battle at arm's length were dying without ever seeing a face close enough to strike. A Gallic rider, pinned through the shoulder, tried to wrench the shaft free and only managed to drag himself sideways in the dust. Nearby, a young soldier with blood running into, one eye kept lifting his shield even after his arm, had started to fail. Publius chose attack over surrender. He sent what strength he had left into desperate charges against the closing ring, hoping to crack one segment before the Parthians sealed it completely. Each effort ended the same way. The horse archers opened space, the cataphracts drove in, and the Romans were thrown back onto the hill with fewer men each time. The consequence was final. Isolation became destruction. Ancient accounts describe Publius dying there with most of his detachment. The Roman counterstroke erased almost to the last man. The record is shaped by hostile distance and later storytelling, but the result itself is clear enough. The force Crassus had sent to save the army was gone. Back at the main Roman position, Crassus did not see the end at first. He saw dust. He heard fragments of fighting carried on the wind. Then the Parthians brought the answer to him. A rider emerged ahead of the circling line with a severed head raised high on a spear. Whether every detail in the ancient descriptions happened exactly as later writers told it, the psychological blow is beyond doubt. Publius was dead, and Surena made sure the Romans understood it immediately. The effect ran through the legions like sickness. One file lost cohesion, then another. Veterans stared forward in silence. Less seasoned men began to glance backward toward Carrhae, toward walls, toward water, toward anything that was not this open killing ground. Crassus, who had gambled his son to regain control of the battle, now had to command an army watching that gamble bleed in front of them. Then Surena tightened the cruelty. The arrows resumed. The cavalry ring narrowed. Daylight was draining, but not fast enough. Roman infantry were still standing, still disciplined, still dangerous at close quarters, yet the enemy refused to give them the one kind of battle they could still fight. And as dusk began to gather over the plain, Crassus made the decision he had been resisting all day. He would abandon the field under cover of darkness and try to reach Carrhae alive. Night gave the Romans one narrow chance, and Crassus took it. Under cover of darkness, the shattered army slipped away from the plain and struggled toward Carrhae, carrying wounded men, abandoning others, trying to keep formation on roads that were little more than black, earth under a moonlit haze. Some whispered for silence. Others were too exhausted to whisper at all. A soldier with an arrowhead still lodged in his calf used his spear as a crutch and kept moving because stopping meant being left behind. Another walked with one hand pressed over his own mouth to keep his teeth from chattering. The decision to retreat saved part of the army at once. It also broke what remained of Roman confidence. Units lost contact, guides failed or betrayed them, according to later accounts. In the darkness, discipline thinned into survival. By morning, some Romans had reached Carrhae, but they had not escaped Surena. The Parthians were still there, still mobile, still controlling the space beyond the walls. Crassus now faced a decision with no clean answer. Remain trapped and wait for the army to dissolve, or attempt negotiation with the man who had just dismantled Rome's pride in open ground. Surena offered talks. Ancient writers present the meeting as a calculated performance, courteous on the surface and lethal underneath. Crassus hesitated. His men, desperate and worn down, pushed him toward the parley. That choice had an immediate consequence. Once he rode out, the last measure of control passed from his hands. Something went wrong in the meeting. Struggle, confusion, panic. The exact sequence is unclear in the sources, but the ending is not. Crassus was killed, and the Roman command collapsed with him. What followed was not just defeat. It was humiliation sharpened into legend. Thousands of Romans were dead. Thousands more were captured. Eagles were lost. Survivors fled where they could, some under officers like Cassius Longinus, carrying back the scale of the disaster to a republic that had believed heavy. Infantry could master any battlefield if only it closed the distance. Later stories embroidered the end. Tales of Crassus's remains dishonored, of gold and mockery and theatrical revenge. Some of that may be myth shaped by Roman shame. But the deeper truth needed no embellishment. At Carrhae, the legions found an enemy who would not stand still, would not meet courage on Roman terms, and would not let discipline become contact. Rome's greatest military instrument had not been broken by weakness. It had been made irrelevant, one arrow at a time.